Hey guys, so I wanted to do a quick video tutorial on the selection and masks worksheet that I have for this week. I'm sorry if my voice goes in and out. My allergies have been really bad, but let's go ahead and get started. So there are directions on this side over here, but I'd like you guys to follow along to what I'm going to do here just so you can get used to using the selection tools as opposed to using the one that's already been done for you. And I'll still show you how to save a selection and whatnot. So the first thing I like to do is hide everything that I won't be using. So we're basically going to cut out this little bird with this branch right here, remove it from its background, place it in this postcard design here, flip it, and then add some drop shadows here. So I don't need this background for now. I don't need any of this text, and that's log, so that's okay. So you want to make sure you're in the layer, you have the layer selected which you're going to cut out from. So remember you have these two, there's actually 3 or 6 different selection tools. The one that we'll be using, we're going to be jumping from the object to the quick selection. Magic Wand tool is a great selection tool to use if we had a plain colored background. In this case we don't, so I'm going to start off with object selection tool. And this is just going to do most of the work for me. As you can see, you can hover over this and it'll have some of it selected for you that may or may not be seen in the version we have at school. This is my home computer, so I have the latest and it does have this cool feature. But I'm going to assume we don't have that at school. So you're going to left click and drag to make a box around our bird here. And it did a pretty good job at selecting the bird. So I'm going to go back to my tools panel, select the quick selection tool, and with the quick selection tool in your edit or options bar up at the top, you notice you have 3 different brush tools. New selection, it'll start selecting something completely new. Add to selection, and then subtract from selection. At this point, I want to select the add to selection because the tree branch right here wasn't added. So I'm just going to, you can left click and drag to color this in or select this, or you can do a couple left taps and it'll start selecting what it thinks you want. And that's okay for now. Now I'm going to go over to my subtract from selection. I can also hit the Alt and hold Alt and it'll do subtract. But yeah, I'm gonna left click here to deselect this stuff. And don't get too picky about this stuff because we're still gonna go into another mode that allows us to clean this up even more. But for now, this is good. I'm seeing marching ants where I want them to be. So up in your options bar, once you have all this selected, you should see a select and mask option. Click on this button right here. And if it doesn't look like this for you, on the right hand side, you should see a view mode here. And then this is basically whatever mode helps you look at your selection best is the one that you're going to choose. I personally like overlay for this one just because it's easier to see for me. You can always change the color here if you want, but I want you to notice that your window changes. You have limited tools here, you have new properties here, and this is only for select and masking mode. The cool thing about the newer versions is it has a refine hair option. We don't have that at school, but it's okay because you don't need it for this one. So what we do here is we're basically cleaning things up a little bit more. You have the same add or subtract from selection. You have quick selection tool if you want to restart it. Refine edge brush tool. Brush tool is the one that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to zoom in here and I'm going to resize this. Use my little brackets on my keyboard, and I'm just going to clean up this selection here. Be careful not to go out like this, which might happen, but you can always hit the minus here. And then I like to hold shift on my keyboard while I'm making these. But yeah, just so you're not accidentally selecting stuff you don't want. but I'm going to clean this up here. It doesn't have to be too perfect, like I said, but take your time. I am going to hit pause here in a minute. That way this video is not too long, and I'm going to refine my selections a bit. Alright, so I'm just about done with the selections. Let's zoom out here. And this is looking pretty good. So we've done a pretty decent job at adding, removing things. I'm going to let this toenail go. It's just about all I don't want to do right now. But I want you to go to your properties panel, and you'll notice that there is even more settings that you can play with. You have color aware, object aware, edge detection. This is what we'll mostly be messing with. But if you play with some of these, you'll notice the pretty big changes that can happen when you move these sliders to the left or to the right. For radius, I like to keep this pretty low because it does mess with our selections. Oops, did not like that keyboard shortcut. But you can see some of the differences right away. And every picture is going to have different requirements. I actually like it better with... that's okay. This is all preference as well. So I'm going to move over to smooth. Again, if I drag this all the way to the right, I'm starting to get some of the background, which I don't want. So usually like a good 3 or 4. 3 to 5 is a good number. Check everything else. That's looking pretty good. Feather just smooths out the, or kind of blurs the selection, so be careful with that too. If I drag this all the way to the right, you'll see that everything just ends up getting selected. This is that like little dreamy effect. I don't want that, so I'm going to bring this down. And then contrast. It's basically how sharp you have your selection. You can start to see some pixelation, and I do not like that, so keeping this... let's see how 1% looks as opposed to nothing. Alright. Shift edge, so if you move this over to the left, you start to cut into your selection. As you can see, it's adding some of the tree branch that I cut. If you move it to the right, it starts to expand, so it starts to add things instead of removing them. So this is also pretty handy. Just be very careful. I'm kind of okay with that right there. Ooh, maybe too much. I'm looking at the beak there. Right, I'm okay with that. And then the most important part is the output setting. So hit this little arrow here. For some pictures, decontamination option is great for the image. If you notice, it's doing something pretty wonky to our selection, but this is completely up to you. You can kind of test to see what looks good with your image. I'm going to turn this off for this since it's not that big of a deal. But the key thing is output to. So you can always do output to a layer mask, and that'll create a layer mask in our current image layer. I like to use new layer with layer mask in case I have to just scrap everything. So your two options, this one or layer mask. So I'm going to select new layer with layer mask, and I'm going to hit OK. And we have something like that. So this is what a layer mask looks like in Photoshop. This is non-destructive. What's cool about this is that I can always come back and double click here and fix any of the selections that I had made, or my any of the selections that I made. I can hit cancel to come back. And now when I turn on this right here, I can see what it looks like with that background. I initially wanted it on. But before I get to that, I wanted to show you guys this option right here of loading or saving a selection. So if I wanted to do, I'm going to do the magic wand for this one. I'm gonna turn that off actually. I'm gonna deselect. Don't do this part, I'm just showing you guys. So select, inverse selection tool. So if you wanted to save the selection for whatever purposes, when you have the marching ants selected, you can come over to the menu bar, select, and then you can hit save selection, rename this to bird, I don't know, 2, because there's already one saved, and then hit OK. I'm going to deselect by hitting Command D. And now let's say this isn't here. But if I didn't want to do this all over again, I can go over to select, load selection, and then, oh my god, I have so many because I've already made so many, but I can hit bird, and then the selection would happen again. If I were to move this image, though, oops, I was going to show you guys that the selection doesn't stay with it, but it looks like it is in this case. That's so weird. Might be a new version thing, not sure. But yeah, that's how you load and save selections. Anyways, I'm going to hide this one, bring back the one that I just made. I want to flip this image, so I'm going to make sure that one's selected. I'm going to go over to image, edit up at the top, transform, and then I'm going to flip it horizontally. There we go. And that's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to delete this layer because I won't need it. And I want you guys to come in here and add drop shadows to these, excuse my dog crying, to this text here. So if you don't remember, you can select the layer, come to your little FX icon down here, look for drop shadow, and then play around with these settings right here to find an effect that you like, hit OK, and you're going to do the same thing for the bottom. Once you're done, you're going to go to File, Save As, and then submit this edit that you made. Alright guys, that is it. Let me know if you need help.